This is something I've been wanting to do for a long time, so stick around. We're gonna put some new batteries in this to power the winch. So we do have a little bit to unpack, so bear with me, but I will go over the current battery setup, the new battery setup, why I'm changing. I've actually got a different 24 volt setup, so we'll go through that. I will also run some winch testing before and after, so I'll do a flat ground pull and I'll do a dead pull on an incline, and I'll measure amp draw, voltage drop, also time, and we'll see if the new batteries offer a massive improvement. So we do have a lot going on in this episode, so make sure you hang around right to the end. So for starters, I'll give you all a quick run over of what the current setup is. So a lot of you obviously probably know already, but those that don't, on this car I run a Red Winch Hornet. These are the original Red Winches that, you know, they developed years and years, probably over 10 years ago. And the race car has the Hornet 2, which is the updated one. They're a twin motor winch with real fast gearing, so they do pull very fast, which means we need to run big fat cable and we need a good battery setup. And that's also the reason we run 24 volt through these. And batteries are the lifeline of a winch. So, you know, bad batteries or batteries that are too small for the application, even bad connections, not enough cable to run the winch. All these things add up. So if you want a winch that pulls hard and fast, you're gonna have to invest in good batteries, good cable, and a good setup. So these are Roadrunner Bullet motors. They are 12 volt motors, and these two power cables are actually 24 volt. So we feed 24 volt into a winch motor to make it spin faster and harder. It's a single best upgrade you can actually do to a winch, in my opinion. The common misconception is though, these are still 12 volt solenoids, and when they advertise that they're 12 or 24 volt solenoids, that refers to the switching side of it. So the switching, these three tabs underneath, that's all still 12 volt, everything's 12 volt. You cannot switch a 12 volt solenoid with 24 volt, you will run into trouble. So the only thing that's 24 volt is these two fat cables. I have done a full 12 versus 24 volt winch test years ago. It was right near the start of my YouTube channel, so I'll actually link that above on the screen somewhere, and I'll probably link it in the comments as well, because that'll answer, you know, everything in regards to why you should go 12 to 24 volt and the benefits and whatever else. So head over to that one, and then make sure you come back and watch this one. So in regards to winch voltage, this applies to 12 volt winching as well, just halve the numbers. But in a 24 volt application, so it'll charge at 28, 29 volts or whatever. If you're winching under load, anything between like 22 and 25 volts is absolutely perfect. Like the winch will be singing at that volt. Between 22 and 20 volts is still okay, but if you're down in that volt range, like the winch is gonna have a fair bit of load on it. So still keep an eye on your stuff if your winch is pulling down to them volts. And then anything under 20 volts is what I would regard as the danger zone. You know, if you're consistently winching and doing like a super long pull or whatever, and it's under 20 volts, you know, might say 19, 18 volts, that's when you could potentially run into problems, say burning a motor out, or, you know, a solenoid, or, you know, potentially hurting the batteries. I've definitely winched a fair few times under 20 volts. It's not a big no-no, but if it is under 20 volts, that's, you know, you're on the edge. So a lot of you probably actually don't know that I changed my 24 volt setup probably 2 years ago now. It's been a long time. This is now my third different way of doing 24 volt in this car. So originally I had the that white 12 24 volt switch box, and then I went to the Red Winch supercharged box when I put the Hornet winch on the front. That was because the original switch box can't handle the amp draw of the two motors. But now I've gone to this. This is an Enerdrive DC to DC 12 to 24 volt charger. It takes 12 volt in and then feeds 24 volt out. These are now becoming very popular for a good reason. But to spare dragging on the start of this whole video, watch till the end, because I'll put more info about that 12 24 volt charger in there and how to set it up and whatever. I'll quickly go over it, but that's not the point of this video. I want to get into testing the winch. So we'll get cracking on that first, and then yeah, stay tuned later and we'll go through that. So this is my current winch battery setup. Now these are two full river HC110s. They are some big solid batteries. They are 1150 cranking amps, and they also have 110 amp hour of capacity. That battery has the most cranking amps I could find in that size battery, which is a like a 31 frame or an N70 size, which is like a Optima D31 size or whatever, like just a sort of generic size. So at 1150 cranking amps, I couldn't really find a battery that offered more cranking amps in that size. So to get more cranking amps, you physically had to go a bigger battery. They are an AGM battery, the absorbent glass mat. And then the problem with an AGM battery is if you want more cranking amps, the battery physically gets a lot heavier. So them batteries weigh, I think it's like 34 kilos each. Like they are super heavy. So just in them two batteries, you know, I've got 68 kilos just sitting there. But they have been solid batteries. Like I've not an issue. They pump some serious power to the winch. Like I'm happy with how it pulls. This car is actually very heavy. So, you know, some of the winching that we have done is like pretty wild. But like I said, they are super heavy. So that's something you're gonna have to keep in mind. And also that battery in itself these days is like, I think they're well into the $700 each. Maybe, I think I've seen somewhere maybe even the low 800s each. So let's get into why I'm changing my batteries, what I'm changing them to, why I changed my 24 volt setup. So that all boils down to these two batteries that I'm replacing them with. So these are the Mega Life, they are lithium battery. Now I have been nervous about putting lithium batteries in, and I still am. There's a lot of people that use lithium these days. You know, I think the misconception with lithium, like exploding and whatever, to do with like your phone battery or, you know, like Tesla cars and that, there's different type of lithium batteries. But these ones are lithium iron phosphate, or LiFePO4 for short. And from people that I've talked to in that industry and the research I've done, my concerns have dwindled a little bit after doing all this research. But I'm not going to bore you with all that. Go online and research for yourself. There's plenty of information out there, and it should put your mind at ease if you are considering lithium. And also to add to that, there has been teams racing in Winch Challenge since 2017 that run lithium. And last year and this year in particular, there's like, off the top of my head, I think there's 4 teams that run lithium batteries and race. And you can really tell the tone in the winch when they do a real hard winch, you know, compared to another car that, you know, run an AGM battery. You can really hear in the winch the difference in the power, and they seem to not have any dramas yet. So that also put my mind at ease. So the details on these batteries are, they are the same N70 size. They're actually a little bit shorter than the current ones I have in there, but same width and pretty much same height. If you can read that there, they have a reserve bank as well, which is activated by this button. But in the main bank, they have 1800 cranking amps and 76 amp hours of battery capacity, which is absolutely massive. So that's a fair bit more over than what I have at the moment. And also keep in mind that at 76 amp hours, it is less than what the current batteries have, but lithium amp hour and the AGM amp hour are different. But these run 3 BMS setups in there. So there's 2 BMS units for the main bank, and then there's 1 BMS unit for the reserve bank when you click this button. So because of the 2 BMS in there, that allows for a lot of amp draw, which is what I need. So these have a continuous amp draw of 300 with peaks of over 1000 amps. That winch on my race car will actually draw potentially over 1000 amps. Again, not all the time. That's why this is fine, because it doesn't draw 1000 amps all the time, but it certainly would peak potentially over 1000 amps, you know, for a split second here and there. So that's why that rating matters. So they've done testing and the batteries are fine to peak draw over 1000. And the reason I went with this battery in particular from this company is because they were confident that it would do what I need it to do. They haven't seen anyone put the stress on these batteries like we potentially would doing what we do with them, because what we do in Winch Challenge in particular is not good for batteries. Like, it's just not what you should be doing with them. But after a long discussion with the boys down there, you know, they were confident that this battery should withstand what we do with them. Now, obviously their batteries are going in this car, but I am going to test these in the race car. Now that has 4 batteries for the winch, but I'm going to do some testing and see if there's much of a difference going from 4 AGM batteries to 2 of these, but that'll be later on down the track. So, you know, to put 4 of these in my race car is gonna hurt the pocket, but that's something I'm gonna have to work out in the future. Now, obviously I am charging it with the DC to DC, but also another good thing about these is they are a direct replacement battery. So these can be charged off the alternator, they can go under your bonnet. You know, if your battery tray, like the Patrol, has a N70 size, you can literally put one of these under the bonnet, no dramas at all. And they also sell a lot of batteries to like circuit racing applications and all sorts of stuff. So all these things sort of added up and made me confident to spend a bit of money on these. A lot of other companies that I've talked to in the past, as soon as you say, you know, the Winch is going to draw potentially 1,000 amps, yeah, they're not interested in selling you the batteries. So I'm definitely keen to see how these go. And also the other major reason is weight. So I get all this power in these batteries and they are like, I think they was 12.5 kilos each, which is a massive difference from the 34 kilos that I've already got. So overall, I'm going from 2,300 cranking amps and 68 kilos to 3,600 cranking amps and 25 kilos. So it's, you know, a 40 kilo saving and an extra 1,300 cranking amps. So on paper, the Winch should actually pull like even harder again. So, you know, I'm sort of itching to get these in and see what they actually do. But also keep in mind, when I was talking to them, I was giving them like worst case scenario winching, like in the race car. And the motors on that Hornet 2, the Red Winch Ox motors, they're a lot bigger motor and they have a lot bigger amp draw. So that's why I just gave him worst case scenario. But these motors, you know, they should draw, I reckon they should peak somewhere in the 300s. I'd be surprised if it was more. So times that by 2 and it's potentially, you know, 700 amps maximum draw, maybe peak to 800. So this winch setup should be definitely suffice for these batteries. It's more so if I was to throw them in the race car, you know, that's why I was giving him worst case scenario and they were happy with that. So it's probably enough of me talking. We'll go out to mum and dad's in the paddock and I'll sort out a couple spots to do some control winching. And then I'll take some notes and whatever with these batteries. We'll do some testing and then I'll throw the new lithiums in and we'll do the same winching and compare the results. I know you probably all get sick of hearing my voice, but I do like to put maximum information in the videos. It's surprising how much time that chews up in a video when you just talk. So I do have these batteries on the charger, and because of the 12-24 volt, the Enerdrive unit, it's actually charging all 3 batteries from this front battery. So that's pretty handy. I've had them 2 on the charger just to make sure everything is fully charged so we get accurate data to compare to. So let's go do some winching. All right, well, I'm just out in the paddock. So I found 2 trees, one on the flat, one on an incline. The weather is absolutely terrible. It's blowing its ass off and raining. I would have liked to wait for a better day, but I am actually very keen to see these results. So I just want to get it done. So first up, I'll do this flat winch and, you know, I might just pace out 15, 20 meters and a point at either end, and then I'll time, you know, how long it takes. And then I've also got this trusty little amp clamp. So this is actually good for reading up to 1,000 amps. Not that we'll see that today, but I'll throw this on the power there and I'll set up a camera and monitor that so we can see. I've also just thrown a camera here quickly and that should capture the, I'll have a stopwatch on my phone going with the time and hopefully it can see the volt gauge. I might have to move it somewhere, but I'll work that out so I can see the volt gauge. And I'll overlay each clip so then we can all see the difference between the 2 batteries in regards to amps, voltage, and then winch time. And with all that data, we should be able to conclude whether it's actually worth, you know, spending the money on something like these lithium batteries or not. But worst case scenario, you know, I've saved myself 40 odd kilos. So, you know, it's still a win in one way. So that's it. I've got a little wheel chock there and then we've got a marker stick out there. It's 20 meters. So let's do it. All right, flat ground, the Full River AGM batteries. Let's get into it.
At the end of all the testing, I'll put all the data on one page and go through it.
But that was roughly 24 seconds. The peak amp draw was like 115. Now remember, that's only one winch motor, so times that by 2, so it's like probably 230 amps, and that's just on flat ground. So I'm sure like under some serious load we're going to see more. And I didn't really see the voltage go below 23, so it was about mid 23s, which is perfect. All right, so we'll do the same. It's not going to look like much of a hill on camera, but to dead pull a car up this bit of a hill is not going to be good for it. But we'll see how we go. It's 20 meters again, so it'll be interesting to see. Obviously last time was 24 seconds. On a hill we'll see how much slower it is. So anyway, let's get winching. Well, that all went pear-shaped. My camera fell off, my stopwatch fell off, and then the amp clamp had timed out, so it wasn't even on. And it was actually pretty brutal. So I'll go back to 10 meters this time, and I'll just run the car for a bit, and then I'll do it again at 10 meters, because yeah, 20 was a bit too savage. So we'll try again. All right, take 2, 10 meters, let's go. All right, again, it's 24 seconds, so basically double the time on a bit of an incline like that. That was honestly, yeah, it was pretty brutal on the winch, on the motors, I should say. The voltage on the winch was pulling pretty hard. It was between 20 and 21, you know, at the worst of it. So that's actually, yeah, that's getting pretty bad. And surprisingly, the peak amp draw was about 250 amps. So double that again, that's 500 amps draw. And that's probably as bad as it would really get. Like, I don't even think it'd crack 300. Like, if them motors were pulling 300 amps, I think there'd be some serious issues. So with the voltage as low as it was, I know that that's a really hard winch. So to see a peak of 250 amps is actually very surprising. So anyway, we'll whiz back up to the shed. I'll swap these batteries out, and then we'll come back and do the same thing and see what happens. Out with the old batteries. And new ones in. Ready to go. I've changed the charger to lithium, so charger mint. I had a couple of little issues, not to do with installing the batteries. I had to weld some stuff and the weld was playing up, so I'm actually running out of daylight, so I'll quickly run out there and hopefully get it all in before we run out of time. So I ended up running out of daylight the other day, so it's a new day but all the same, so let's get testing. So this is a flat ground test with the 2 Megalife lithium batteries. Let's see how they go. That was impressive. That was very impressive. So that's the time for the flat ground pull, 20 meters. So I'll round that up to 18 seconds. So that's actually very impressive. I think the other time was 24 seconds, so 6 seconds faster. So that's actually crazy. We'll go do the hill pull now. And this is the uphill pull, 10 meters, the 2 Megalife lithium batteries. So let's see what this does. Well, the camera fell off the dash straight away because of the hill. And I didn't reset the stopwatch, so it actually added on from 18, so it's at 36. But that still means 18 seconds on the uphill pull, which is the same reduction in speed compared to the other batteries. So 10 meters uphill is the same as 20 meters flat. But 18 seconds, again, that's 6 seconds faster than the other batteries. So that's actually very impressive. So I thought I'll get this car out and just do a quick test as well to do some comparing data to the other car. But also, like I said, I want to put the 2 lithiums in this and do the same to see how they stack up. So we'll do the exact same pulls with this car and see how it stacks up. So this is a Red Winch Hornet 2, actually the newer model compared to what's on my wagon. And this winch runs Red Winch's Ox motors. And it's got the bigger winch solenoids as well, the DC 182s, while the wagon has the DC 88s. And this also runs 4,000 cranking amp Delcore batteries just for the winch. But I absolutely love these motors. These are probably my favorite motors. So these motors claim to rev to about 11,000 RPM, where most of the other motors are around 6,000. That's going off data supplied by all the motor manufacturers. So even though the gearing is very, very similar between these 2 winches, they've both just got the standard ratios. This winch will pull a hell of a lot faster because of the motors that spin up heaps faster. Obviously, with faster speed, you need more torque, and when you need more torque, it obviously draws more power. So yeah, they draw a fair bit of power, but if you can keep all the battery power up to them and that, they're absolutely savage motor. So let's do some testing. Also keep in mind that this car's been sitting for a while and the batteries aren't really fully charged. So it'll be right for this. Race car winch test, let's go. So that was 12.5 seconds. I don't know, call it 13, I suppose. So that's still 5 seconds faster on the exact same pull. And if you compare it to the wagon with the AGM batteries, it's actually half the time to do the same pull. So that's actually pretty incredible. But 12.5 seconds, you know, 13 seconds to do a 20 meter pull, that's just under 2 meters a second on the winch. So that's fast. All right, race car test up the hill, let's go. So pretty much exactly the same. So 12.81, 13 seconds. So it's all been the same between the flat and the hill pull, which is actually interesting. But to pull the car 10 meters up, it's a decent little hill. Yeah, it's pretty hard on the winch, but to pull it up in 13 seconds is pretty awesome. I also just put my foot on the brake and loaded the winch up briefly, as hard as I sort of could, just quickly. And I've only just quickly looked at the footage on my phone, but I'll throw it in now. I'm pretty sure I cracked 500 amps. So as you can see, although it was briefly cracked 500 amps, and if the winch was pulling that hard, I wouldn't winch any further because that's like damaged motors territory. It's still cracked 500. I'm pretty sure I've seen 570 for a brief second. Now obviously that's not going to remain consistent, but you times that by 2 and that's 1140 amps. You know, the 2 motors are pulling, which is absolutely heaps. But again, like I said, if you kept winching, drawing that many amps, you'd blow the motors up. So it was definitely very interesting to see. I've never actually amp tested these myself. So there you go.
Here we have all the data from both batteries on both pulls. You can see the exact weights between the batteries. We've got the Mega Life coming in at 12.5 and the Full River coming in at 34.6. That's a massive 22.1 kilo saving per battery, which means I've saved 44.2 kilos. So you can see up top, we've got the flat pull for 20 meters. The amps were pretty similar. The Mega Life drawing 10 less amps, but the volts staying 2.5 higher and a massive speed increase of 6 seconds faster. The hill pull for 10 meters is where you can see some massive differences. So we've gone from the Full River pulling 250 amps down to the Mega Life, it's only drawing 175 amps. So that's a massive 75 amp reduction. And as you can see in the volts as well, the Mega Life is an average of 3 volts high through the whole pull. And again, with the time, we save a massive 6 seconds.
So after all that footage and all that information, is it worth investing the money into batteries like this? Now, obviously they aren't cheap, like they're an expensive battery. So it is a big investment, you know, especially to buy 2 of them. Like I'd really love to put 4 in the race car, but the money investment in that is pretty wild. It might happen one day, it might not, who knows? We'll find that out later. But in this particular situation, I 100% think that this is actually good investment. The extra power, the weight situation, and the fact that they're a little bit smaller, I could rejig my batteries down the back there, and I could create a bit more room if I wanted to. And like I said earlier, the question mark is longevity. So it's definitely worth the money as long as they stand the test of time under this sort of use, which I have no doubt that they will. But you know, back in the old days of Optimas, you know, 10, 12 years ago when they were made, I think they were made in America actually, it was not uncommon to see Optimas last 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years even. You know, like that was not uncommon. So providing you get similar life out of these batteries, then I 100% think the investment is worth it. It'd be awesome to actually throw a third one in here, in the back actually as a 12 volt one, and then save another 15, 18 kilos again. Like I've been putting a lot of thought into where I can save weight in this car just to cut back a little bit, and there's no real areas where I can just cut back anything without sacrificing something. You know, in this case, I've lost 40 kilos, but I've gained a lot of battery power. So, you know, it's sort of a tough one. If I wanted to lose weight elsewhere, you know, I'd have to trim up the bar work and have less protection, or put a smaller winch on, which is slower and doesn't pull as hard, or less lights or less spare parts or something along those lines. You know, something has got to be taken away, where in this case, you know, like I just said, we've saved 40 kilos and I've got a heap more battery power. So that's my take on it all. I'm very happy with the investment, no complaints. It's now time to get this car out and do some real world winching. We'll do some hard stuff, but stick around and we'll go over that Enerdrive box. There's still a bit more to come. All right, hopefully you've stuck around this long, so I'll quickly go over this Enerdrive box, because if you've got a tourer like this and you don't want to put a second alternator on, you know, for whatever reason, in my opinion, this is probably the best way to do a 24 volt setup. The only downside really is you have to have 3 batteries. So you have to have your front 12 volt, and then you have to have 2 batteries for your 24 volt in the back. Where previously, you know, that Red Winch supercharged box, you could have 2 batteries in your car. So you could have a main and auxiliary battery, and then link them up to 24 volt for the winch. So everything has its purpose. Everything's, you know, no matter which way you go, like say the supercharged box, this Enerdrive unit, or an alternator, you know, they all work good in their own ways. So no matter which way you go, they're all going to work good. So again, here it is. This is the Enerdrive DC to DC 24 volt charger. I'll put the part number on the screen. There's a lot of guys selling them, like they're pretty popular now. But don't be mistaken, because there's a lot of units that have, you know, that look exactly the same. Some of them are just a 12 volt DC to DC, so make sure you get the 24 volt one. So what this does is it takes 12 volt from my front battery into the unit. So it's got a 12 volt power and earth, and it literally just has 24 volt power and earth out that charges this whole bank. There are different brands that do similar things, like Victron do one, and Red Arc do one, which I don't actually know much about the Red Arc one, but I do have a couple of mates running the Victron one. The reason I chose the Enerdrive one is it actually has a solar input. So this is a little Anderson plug, and you need, like, you don't need the external regulator or anything, like that is the regulator. You can plug your solar blanket straight into that, and it will charge your 24 volt bank. So that gets rid of, you know, all the little regulator and that usually comes with the blankets. I know mine failed once upon a time, so you know, I've just eliminated all that, and now I just, yeah, charge a 24 volt with the solar if I'm camping for a few days. And then I try and run everything possible off the 24 volt. The fridge and everything runs off 24 volt. Ideally, I would like my compressors and all that sort of stuff and the travel buddy to all run off the 24 volt system. But I've got to work towards that, because obviously I need to buy some more stuff, which I don't really want to buy, but I'll get around to that one day. Another reason I like the Energize box is its variable charge rates. So I think it can charge 5, 10, 20 and 30 amps. So it can actually charge up to 30 amps at 24 volt. But there is a downside to that. So what you got to keep in mind is whatever it's charging at 24 volt, you have to double it, and that's what it's pulling off your 12 volt system. So if you want to charge at 30 amps 24 volt, that's pulling 60 amps off your 12 volt system. You know, if you only have a 100 amp alternator and you're trying to run light bars and whatever else, it will actually drain all your 12 volt system and flatten it even as you're driving. So you need to be pretty smart with how you set it up. You need to make sure your 12 volt system is absolutely tip top, and potentially the highest amp rated alternator you can fit on whatever car you've got. Now my 12 volt system only has one battery, and that's an Optima. Now the recommendations of charge rates from the Energize manual is you need 50 amp hour of capacity to charge at 10 amps 24 volt, and then if you want to charge at 20 amps you need 100 amp hour of capacity, and if you want to charge at 30 amps you need 150 amp hour of capacity. You know, so for me, potentially to be able to charge properly at 30 amps, I would need 2 Optimas on my 12 volt side because they are 75 amp hours each. So I just flick between 10 and 20 amps. It's all adjustable on the box. So, you know, if it's night time and if I'm doing a lot of winching, you know, and I've got my lights on and all that sort of stuff, I charge at 10 amps. But say for example, if we winch all through the night, you know, and then I'm camping and the batteries are really far down and then we have a long way to drive in the morning, you know, I might bump it up to 20 amps when we're just sitting on the road driving and I've got no lights on or anything like that, and it will charge at 20 amps. And I also run a 130 amp alternator. So all this stuff you have to keep in mind. That's probably the downside of this sort of setup, is it does chew a lot out of your 12 volt system, which is part of the reason why I want to try and transfer all my stuff on a 24 volt. It's a bit hard because I had pretty much most of that set up before I put this 24 volt thing in. So if I was setting it up from the start, then yeah, I would have bought a 24 volt compressor, 24 volt oven, all that stuff, and set it up exactly like I was saying. But I'm just going to sort that out in the future. Currently, yeah, charging it, the majority of the time I just charge at 10 amps and that is working absolutely fine. But obviously, you know, if you put a lot of load on your 12 volt system and you kill an alternator, you know, pretty much you're going to lose everything. You know, when we went to Tassie and even some of the high country drives I've done, I've actually just carried an alternator because yeah, if the 12 volt alternator dies, then you know, you can't really do much else. I would just disconnect the 24 volt system. I do have an isolator in the 12 volt power that runs to the back, but I would just disconnect that and try and minimal draw on the car to try and get you home. So there are obviously pros and cons with no matter which way you go, but pretty much the main reason I went to this Energize box, you know, a couple of years ago is I wanted to go to lithium. Now, if I wanted to fit a 24 volt alternator, then that would have been fine. But with the Winch supercharged box, because it links all your batteries up, you know, I can't run, you know, an AGM Optima up the front and link it to the lithium in the back. You're not supposed to do that sort of stuff. So that's why initially I made the change, because that Energize unit has a couple different settings depending on what batteries you use. So, you know, it can take whatever 12 volt in and then it can charge out, whether it's AGM or lead acid or lithium. So it has different voltage and different charge rates and all that sort of stuff, depending on what batteries you run. So that's pretty much the main reason I went down that path. And having the solar input is also handy, and it actually takes up less room. You don't need as many, you know, with that the supercharged switch box, there's a lot of big cables running everywhere, but now, you know, there's no, the only big cables is the ones that run to the winch. So a mate of mine from Tassie, Timmy Has Heart on YouTube, he actually did an install video of one of them Energize boxes a couple of weeks ago now. I'll see if I can link it on the screen. So there's more detail in that video as well about how we installed it and all that. I never actually done an install video on that box because I had plans to put the lithium in and do it all at once. And then I just never got around to doing the lithium because I could never find one that would suit my application. So no install video from me. Well, that's it. New batteries in. Pretty happy with them so far, like I said. Really what I need to do now is like, you know, another boys trip where we do a hell of a lot of winching, you know, and it's just a bit of abuse on the car just to see how they all stack up. Also, like I said earlier, I'll be throwing them two in the race car just to see how they go with bigger winch motors, you know, that car's set up for 4 batteries, so we'll see how the 2 batteries stack up. But overall, very happy with them. So the next big question mark in front of it all is longevity of the batteries. You know, are they going to survive the test of time? I have no doubt that they'll be fine and they'll survive. So yeah, hope you learned something. I know I did. Stay tuned because I am going to take this out for a drive, and also I've been working on the race car today as well, and if I spend another day on that, it'll be ready for a drive. So the aim is to have both cars going again so I can do some driving. So stick around for all that, and I'll see you on the next one.